He started life as a servant, invisible in his own family, running alongside his brother's bicycle to take dictation. Yet by the end, his name would be on millions of breakfast tables worldwide. This is the story of ambition, betrayal, and a fortune built from cornflakes, but at a cost no money could ever repay. On the highest rise overlooking Gull Lake in southwestern Michigan, 110 feet above the quiet water, stands a 15,000 square foot Tudor mansion of timber, stucco, and old-world ambition. Its builder, one of the wealthiest men in America, insisted on calling it simply the cottage. The name sounded humble, almost playful. Yet the structure itself told a different story. It was a palace of success built by a man who had spent nearly half his life in obedience, invisibility, and relentless work. Before he became a titan of American industry, W.K. Kellogg was, in many ways, a servant to his older brother. For 25 years he worked inside his brother's institution, laboring through 120-hour weeks for little pay and less recognition. He took dictation at all hours. He recorded instructions wherever they were given, even if that meant standing patiently while his employer spoke from the most undignified of settings. He ran beside his brother's bicycle with notebook in hand, prepared to capture every fleeting idea. The employer who demanded such devotion was not a stranger or distant superior. It was his own brother, John Harvey Kellogg, a man celebrated across the nation as a medical visionary. Battle Creek in the late 19th century was not an ordinary American town. It was the spiritual heart of the Seventh-day Adventist movement, a community shaped by apocalyptic expectation and strict discipline. Residents believed the second coming of Christ was near. They rejected meat, alcohol, tobacco, coffee, and indulgence of nearly every kind. The human body was regarded as a temple that had to be purified, guarded, and regulated. In this atmosphere of religious intensity and health obsession, the Kellogg children grew up among 16 siblings, surrounded by sermons about discipline and constant reminders of mortality. Disease took 6 of those children. Survival alone felt like a kind of achievement. John Harvey Kellogg rose quickly within that world. Frail in childhood, yet fiercely intelligent, he was noticed by church leaders and sponsored through medical school. By 1876, he returned to Battle Creek as a credentialed physician, ready to lead the struggling Western Health Reform Institute. He renamed it the Battle Creek Medical Surgical Sanitarium and transformed it into something entirely new. He coined the word sanitarium. Himself, blending sanitation with healing, as if language itself could be engineered for reform. The sanitarium, known simply as the San, expanded into a 30-acre campus with more than 30 buildings. It became a health empire. At its height, the main structure could house 300 guests, and up to 1,000 employees worked under John Harvey's direction. The institution combined strict vegetarian meals, exercise regimens, hydrotherapy, and experimental digestive treatments. Patients were wrapped, bathed, steamed, vibrated, irrigated, and disciplined back toward what the doctor called purity. His theory was that most disease began in the intestines. Clean the body, he believed, and the spirit would follow. The San attracted the powerful and the famous. Presidents William Howard Taft, Warren G. Harding, and Calvin Coolidge walked its halls. Industrial giants like Henry Ford and Harvey Firestone sought its treatments. Thomas Edison came to rest his mind. Amelia Earhart prepared for daring flights under its watch. The sand became a symbol of disciplined modern health, blending religion, science, and spectacle. Behind this empire stood Will Keith Kellogg, the overlooked brother. Poor eyesight had marked his childhood as a disappointment. Teachers assumed he was slow because he could not see the blackboard. No one tested his vision. At 13, he left school and sold brooms door to door. He learned persistence in rejection and precision in bookkeeping. When he joined the Sanitarium as a teenager, he entered not as an equal partner, but as a subordinate. For decades he managed accounts, supervised staff, negotiated suppliers, and absorbed criticism. John Harvey dominated the spotlight, while Will balanced the books in the shadows. In 1902, disaster struck when fire consumed the sanitarium's main building. More than 400 guests were evacuated into the cold night. Only one life was lost, yet the financial blow was severe. John Harvey rebuilt grander than before, later adding a towering structure that reshaped the skyline of Battle Creek. His ambition expanded alongside the buildings. Treatments grew more elaborate. Yogurt was prescribed for internal balance. Mechanical devices shook patients in vibrating chairs. Enemas were administered in astonishing volumes. The doctor's reputation grew, but so did tension between the brothers. The conflict centered on food. In pursuit of bland, digestible meals that suppressed desire and improved health, experiments with cooked grains produced flaked cereal. John Harvey viewed it as part of his health philosophy. Will saw something else entirely. He saw a commercial opportunity far beyond the walls of the sanitarium. He believed cereal could be sweetened slightly, packaged attractively, and sold nationwide. His brother rejected the idea of sugar and mass marketing. Their disagreement widened into rivalry. In 1906, Will Keith Kellogg broke away and founded his own cereal company. He risked everything on the belief that ready-to-eat cornflakes could become a staple in American homes. His instincts proved correct. Production soared. Marketing campaigns were bold and modern. His signature appeared on every box. By the 1920s, cornflakes were no longer a niche health product, but a national habit. Factories shipped tens of thousands of boxes daily. The once invisible bookkeeper became one of the wealthiest industrialists in the country. Yet success did not bring peace. John Harvey sued for rights to the family name. The legal battles stretched on, deepening bitterness. Brothers who had once shared a mission barely spoke. Their conflict was not only about branding, but about recognition, ideology, and control. One saw himself as a moral reformer betrayed by commerce. The other saw himself as a practical visionary, finally stepping out from lifelong subordination. By 1925, at age 65, Will Keith Kellogg chose to build something entirely his own. He selected 32 acres along Gull Lake, with 600 feet of private shoreline and the highest elevation overlooking the water. He hired the firm Benjamin & Benjamin from Grand Rapids to design a residence that looked centuries old. The exterior rose in half-timbered geometry, stucco panels framed in dark wood. Leaded glass windows bore heraldic designs that caught the morning light. Imported Ludowici tiles crowned the roof, and terracotta chimneys punctuated the skyline with European character. The estate extended beyond the house. A Dutch windmill stood as a decorative flourish. A greenhouse supplied roses and citrus year-round. A boathouse anchored the shoreline. A pagoda added an unexpected international touch. When landscapers suggested planting saplings that would mature over decades, Kellogg refused to wait. Mature trees were transplanted at once. He had spent too many years waiting for acknowledgement. Now he demanded completion within his own lifetime. He called it the cottage, a name that concealed grandeur beneath modesty. For a man raised in scarcity, and overshadowed by brilliance not his own, the mansion symbolized autonomy. It was proof that discipline, patience, and commercial courage could rival intellectual prestige. Yet even here, overlooking calm waters and manicured grounds, the shadow of family conflict lingered. Near the end of John Harvey's life, a letter of reconciliation was sent to the lakeside house. It arrived as an olive branch, extended across decades of silence. Will Keith Kellogg did not open it in time. The opportunity for peace slipped away, sealed in paper. The cottage stood as both monument and reminder. Success can build estates of stone and timber, but it cannot easily rebuild broken bonds. The story of Cornflakes is therefore not merely a tale of breakfast innovation. It is a narrative of faith, ambition, rivalry, and the heavy cost of recognition. From the disciplined halls of the Sanitarium to the tranquil heights above Gull Lake, it traces the transformation of a servant into an industrial icon. It reveals how an overlooked child, with poor eyesight, reshaped American mornings and constructed a palace he insisted on calling small, carrying within its walls both triumph and regret. It often succeeded immediately and involuntarily. The treatments at the Battle Creek Sanitarium were designed to overwhelm the senses and command the body into submission. Patients stepped into light therapy cabinets, lined with rows of glowing electric bulbs. Their skin bathed in artificial sunlight, meant to recharge nerves and cleanse hidden weaknesses. Sinusoidal machines hummed softly as controlled electrical currents passed through arms and legs, promising stimulation without harm. Mechanical horses rocked rhythmically beneath seated guests, simulating the motion of riding across open countryside for those too frail to mount a living animal. Even the powerful surrendered to these inventions. President Calvin Coolidge became so fond of the mechanical horse that he later ordered one installed inside the White House, a symbol of how completely the sanitarium's influence reached into the highest offices of the nation. The spectacle of these therapies masked a deeper and more consuming obsession in the mind of John Harvey Kellogg. Beneath the white suits, the spotless hallways, and the scientific vocabulary lay a rigid moral doctrine centered not only on digestion but on sexuality. He believed human desire was a dangerous force that had to be controlled with the same intensity applied to disease. His marriage to Ella Eaton in 1879 reflected that philosophy. Their union was never consummated. They lived in separate bedrooms throughout their lives, maintaining a relationship defined by partnership and principle rather than intimacy. Instead of raising biological children, they opened their home to 40, 2 foster children, and legally adopted 8. Constructing a family built on guardianship rather than reproduction. Kellogg's writings revealed the severity of his convictions. In lectures and widely circulated books, he warned that what he termed the solitary vice led to catastrophic physical and mental decline. He linked masturbation to spinal weakness, skin disorders, poor eyesight, heart palpitations, epilepsy, and even madness. He framed these claims with clinical authority, presenting them not as speculation, but as medical certainty. His prescriptions were uncompromising. For boys, He advocated circumcision without anesthesia, arguing that the pain would form a permanent psychological deterrent. In extreme situations, he suggested surgical measures designed to prevent arousal entirely. For girls, he recommended the direct application of carbolic acid to the clitoris as a corrective measure. These recommendations were published openly, delivered to audiences that filled auditoriums, and absorbed into the broader reform culture of the time. His reputation shielded him from widespread challenge, allowing radical ideas to circulate under the banner of health. The Sanitarium's dietary system evolved within this framework. Rich, seasoned foods were believed to inflame passion and excite the nervous system. Simplicity became a moral virtue. Grains were prepared without heavy spices or indulgent flavor. Meals were structured to calm rather than stimulate. The search for digestible, passion-dampening food led to experimentation with cooked wheat and corn. Through accident and refinement, flaked cereal emerged. What began as a tool of bodily discipline would become a commercial revolution. While John Harvey commanded lecture halls and medical journals, his younger brother lived in his shadow. W.K. Kellogg arrived each morning before dawn at the Sanitarium in Battle Creek and rarely departed before midnight. He balanced accounts, answered letters, negotiated with suppliers, supervised staff, and absorbed his brother's relentless demands. His work weeks stretched to 120 hours. Compensation remained modest. Recognition was nearly non-existent. The physical exhaustion was matched by emotional strain. He addressed his older brother formally as Dr. Kellogg, reinforcing a hierarchy that never relaxed. When the doctor cycled across the grounds, Will ran alongside with notebook ready. When dictation came at inconvenient or humiliating moments, it was recorded without protest. For 25 years he endured this rhythm, convinced that opportunity existed nowhere else. In private moments, doubt crept in. He wrote in his diary of fearing permanent poverty, of watching others prosper from ideas born inside the sanitarium while he remained a subordinate. Battle Creek had become a hub of serial experimentation. Entrepreneurs observed the health, food movement and launched competing ventures. Fortunes appeared almost overnight. He had helped refine the flaked cereal process, yet the financial rewards flowed elsewhere. The imbalance sharpened his awareness of possibility. In 1906, at 46 years old, he acted. He founded the Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company and purchased his brother's share of the cereal operation. The decision marked a break not only in business, but in identity. For the first time, he controlled his own direction. He recognized a truth his brother dismissed. Americans did not seek medical instruction with their morning meal. They wanted convenience and flavor. He adjusted the recipe, adding sugar and salt to enhance taste. It was a deliberate step away from rigid doctrine and toward consumer desire. He embraced advertising with boldness rare for the era. 1/3 of his startup capital funded a single national advertisement in Ladies' Home Journal. The promotion invited women to signal their grocer for a complimentary sample of Kellogg's Cornflakes. The strategy created curiosity and immediate demand. Sales multiplied dramatically, particularly in major cities. He followed with further campaigns, free samples, and eye-catching packaging. He signed his name prominently across each box, transforming a surname into a brand promise. That signature distinguished his product from the growing field of imitators and linked the Kellogg name directly to grocery shelves across the country. John Harvey watched this rise with irritation that hardened into resentment. In 1908, he entered the cereal market himself, using the Kellogg name to sell competing products. The brothers who had shared decades of labor now faced each other as rivals. Consumers encountered two Kellogg cereals, each claiming authenticity. Confusion spread, and legal confrontation became inevitable. By 1910, the dispute had reached the courts. Both men asserted ownership over their shared surname. John Harvey argued that decades of medical leadership had established the Kellogg name as synonymous with health authority. He had treated presidents and industrial magnates, published extensively, and built a nationally recognized institution. In his view, his younger brother's success rested upon a reputation forged in the Sanitarium's halls. Will countered with evidence of massive advertising expenditures and the unmistakable signature printed on every cereal box. The public associated the name Kellogg not with medical lectures, but with the sweet, crisp flakes filling breakfast bowls. Grocery stores displayed his product nationwide. The brand's identity had shifted from clinical reform to everyday nourishment. The conflict intensified in 1916, when further product launches deepened market confusion. The case advanced to the Michigan Supreme Court, where testimony stretched across a month. Witnesses described the origins of Cornflakes, the structure of the Sanitarium, and the marketing campaigns that reshaped the cereal industry. The courtroom became a stage upon which family history was dissected in legal language. In December 1920, the court delivered a decisive ruling. Will Keith Kellogg secured exclusive rights to use the Kellogg name on cereal products. His brother was ordered to account for profits earned under the disputed branding. The judgment represented more than commercial victory. It confirmed that public identity had shifted. The name once associated primarily with medical reform now belonged, in the marketplace, to a businessman who understood advertising, flavor, and scale. The outcome cemented the transformation of a subordinate bookkeeper into an industrial magnate. The Sanitarium's philosophy had unintentionally given birth to a product that escaped its moral framework and conquered grocery aisles worldwide. The brother who once ran beside a bicycle, with notebook in hand, now commanded factories, producing tens of thousands of boxes each day. The legal triumph closed one chapter of rivalry while leaving emotional wounds unresolved. Success had delivered wealth and recognition, yet it had also deepened the fracture between two men bound by blood and divided by vision. The conflict between the Kellogg brothers was never simply a business dispute. It was the collision of two visions shaped by the same childhood, yet driven by entirely different ambitions. John Harvey Kellogg believed he was advancing a moral and medical crusade. To him, food was medicine, discipline was salvation, and the Battle Creek Sanitarium was a laboratory for reforming humanity. W.K. Kellogg, by contrast, saw possibility in accessibility. He understood that ordinary families did not want lectures on purity with their breakfast. They wanted something affordable, consistent, and enjoyable. That subtle difference in perspective, idealism versus practicality, would fracture them more decisively than any legal ruling. In the early days at the Sanitarium in Battle Creek, Will worked quietly in the background. He kept the books, managed the accounts, and stayed late after others had gone home. He absorbed the rhythm of supply and demand while his older brother absorbed applause. Patients came from across the country to see John Harvey, who was already a celebrated physician. Will listened from the edges of rooms, watching how visitors responded not only to treatments but to the simple pleasure of crisp cereal served at breakfast. When flaked grains accidentally emerged from the rollers, it was Will who recognized their commercial potential beyond the Sanitarium's dining hall. He imagined train shipments, grocery shelves, and a national appetite waiting to be met. John Harvey resisted adding sugar to the flakes, viewing sweetness as a moral weakness. Will saw sugar as an invitation. That disagreement was not merely about ingredients. It symbolized their diverging philosophies. One brother sought to elevate humanity through strict reform. The other believed that improvement required meeting people where they were. When Will decided to strike out on his own and build a company around cornflakes, he was not only starting a factory. He was declaring independence from a lifetime of deference. The lawsuit that followed carved a permanent line between them. Securing the right to use the Kellogg name was both triumph and tragedy for Will. He had fought for recognition, for ownership of his labor and insight, and he won. Yet victory left him estranged from the man whose approval he had sought since childhood. In later years, when business required their paths to cross, Will insisted on witnesses. He would not sit alone with John Harvey. The emotional ledger between them could not be balanced. As the cereal business expanded, Will revealed a gift for innovation that rivaled his brother's medical creativity. He invested heavily in advertising, embracing bold print campaigns and radio spots when others hesitated. During economic downturns, he increased marketing rather than cutting it, believing visibility built trust. He introduced packaging improvements that kept cereal fresher and safer. He refined production methods, streamlined distribution, and built a workforce that could sustain massive output without sacrificing consistency. Factories rose, railcars departed daily, and the Kellogg name began appearing on breakfast tables far beyond Michigan. Yet personal life rarely mirrored corporate success. Will's upbringing in a strict Seventh-day Adventist household had emphasized work over play, restraint over indulgence. Even as wealth accumulated, he often felt an absence where childhood memories should have been. When he built his manor overlooking Gull Lake, he seemed determined to reclaim something intangible. The estate was not merely an expression of prosperity. It was a stage for laughter he had missed. He watched grandchildren run across the lawns with a mixture of pride and wistfulness, aware that their freedom contrasted sharply with his own disciplined youth. Philanthropy became another avenue for personal meaning. In 1930, as the Great Depression tightened its grip on American families, Will establish the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. He directed millions toward children's health, nutrition, and education. Schools received funding. Hospitals expanded pediatric care. Community programs gained stability. He insisted that children represented the future strength of the nation, and that investing in them was both practical and humane. He did not frame his giving as charity, but as responsibility. The fortune he had built from breakfast cereal flowed outward into classrooms and clinics, reshaping lives in quiet, lasting ways. Tragedy, however, continued to shadow him. A grandson's disabling injury profoundly affected his outlook on child welfare. A painful rift with his son John Leonard led to estrangement that never healed. Another grandson, burdened by expectations, succumbed to despair. These losses introduced an undercurrent of regret beneath the surface of accomplishment. Publicly, Will remained composed and decisive. Privately, he endured fractures that wealth could not mend. Blindness arrived late in life, the result of glaucoma that gradually stole his sight. For a man whose empire depended on vision, both literal and strategic, the irony was sharp, yet he adapted. Guided by trained dogs and trusted associates, he continued attending meetings and touring facilities. He listened carefully, asking detailed questions, retaining an astonishing memory for figures and forecasts. His determination signaled that leadership did not depend solely on eyesight, but on clarity of purpose. Meanwhile, John Harvey's fortunes declined. The Sanitarium that had once dazzled patients struggled financially. His influence within the Seventh-day Adventist Church waned. In his final years, he composed a letter to his younger brother, acknowledging past harshness and expressing regret. When it arrived, Will chose not to hear it immediately. The envelope remained unopened while time slipped away. After John Harvey's death in 1943, the apology was finally read aloud. It came too late to repair what decades of pride and misunderstanding had broken. Will lived until 1951, matching his brother's age at death. Both were laid to rest in Oak Hill Cemetery in Battle Creek. Their graves lie close together, an arrangement that contrasts sharply with the emotional distance that defined their adult lives. Nearby rest other notable figures, including Sojourner Truth and serial competitor C.W. Post, tying the story of the Kellogg's to broader threads of American history. Today, the Kellogg name remains synonymous with breakfast. Boxes bearing Will's signature are stacked in supermarkets around the world. The manor on Gull Lake became part of Michigan State University, serving as a biological research station rather than a private retreat. The transformation of private wealth into public institution mirrors the arc of his life. He began as a bookkeeper in his brother's shadow and ended as the architect of a global brand and a major philanthropic legacy. The story of the Kellogg brothers is not solely about cereal or court battles. It is about ambition shaped by upbringing, about the tension between reform and accessibility, about recognition long withheld and fiercely claimed. It is about the cost of pride and the limits of reconciliation. Empires can be constructed from simple grains of corn. Yet the relationships that nourish a life are far more fragile. In the quiet earth of Battle Creek, the war over a name has long since ended. What remains is a legacy divided between innovation and regret, generosity and loss, triumph and silence. In the end, W.K. Kellogg had built an empire that fed millions, transformed education, and reshaped the world of breakfast forever. Yet the greatest victories of wealth and fame could not mend the wounds of a lifetime. Family lost, reconciliations too late, and joys that came only in glimpses. These were the silent costs of a man who had everything the world could give, but could never reclaim what he had missed. His legacy lives on in every bowl of cornflakes poured. A reminder that triumph is measured not only in what we achieve, but in what we cannot recover.